Welcome back. Now, according to Stats SA, in the third quarter, 16.7 million people were employed. That's an uptick of nearly 3% in employment from the previous period. The official unemployment rate now sits at 31.9%, marginally lower than the 32.6% registered in the second quarter. Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko, who's development economist at Stellenbosch Business School, joins us with her analysis of this jobs print and what it suggests about the country's labour market. Nthabiseng, thank you for your time and a good afternoon to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon.
All right, 399,000 jobs, I think, employment increasing by that. Fewer people who are unemployed, fewer people who are not economically active. Is this something to write home about?
Absolutely not. Let me get to the point. A decade ago, if you look at the numbers where we were exactly at this time, a decade ago, 2013, and that's where we started to see a decline in the economic outcomes and economic output for the country. We had unemployment levels of 4.9 million. We're sitting now at more than 7.8 million. The decline that is being spoken about is a minuscule 0.7 quarter-on-quarter decline. And I think South Africans and also the market generally needs to understand that we are not capturing at the rate and at the pace that is required to deal with the conundrum of the more than 11.7 million unemployed South Africans. So it's nothing to write home about. We actually are sitting on more than, since a decade ago, 2.9 million unemployed. So it has risen astronomically to levels where you now include the discouraged work seekers of 3.2 million. That leads you to the more than 11 million South Africans that are unemployed, 11.7 to be exact. So we are really sitting on an unemployment crisis.
Mm-hmm. I'm concerned about what we are seeing also with people who are not economically active, Dr. Nthabiseng. And I'm wondering if you can help us put that into perspective. When people are sitting at home and they're doing absolutely nothing for their economic prospects, are these our 350 Rand people?
So the issue that you raise is very important because obviously it's those people that are at home, it's retired persons, it's students, and those are full-time. And you are sitting with, the number has decreased slightly. Stats SA has released today that the economically active is slightly lower than what it was, I think 13.1 from 13.3. So I think there's a slight improvement there. But it's not coming from the decrease in discouraged work seekers. So there's a 29,000 decline in that, but it's not pushing it under 13.2 million. So it's stubborn, that 13.2, and it's not moving at all. So I think the crisis is that you cannot sustain an economy by having more unemployed people than employed. I want to emphasize that. And I think that this is the issue now that we are grappling with, is that you actually need to start to reconfigure and reignite the economy so that you can start to absorb those people that are not economically active, and particularly the discouraged work seekers who are at the bulk the youth. So the 15 to 24 is where you're seeing more than 60% unemployment. So I think there's not enough being done, Nolthando. There's not enough from policy perspective. There's not enough from institutional perspective in terms of emphasis. There's not enough in terms of just talking about this. If this was a COVID crisis, you would hear about it every day. You would see the stats being spoken about. You would know where the hotspots are. In South Africa right now, if I can tell you, 7 of the 9 provinces have more than 40% unemployment expanded definition. Just want to repeat that. 7 out of 9 provinces have more than 40% unemployment level. That means that outside of the Northern Cape, which has more than half the population not working, it's the Northwest, 51.2%. All the others, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, Free State, KZN, Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, more than 42% unemployment. And where are the hotspots? Where are the regions within those? What is being done at a district level to put interventions in place and to monitor whether those interventions are successful? It is clearly not working, whatever we are doing now, from an economic strategy perspective. And to have a 41.2% expanded definition of unemployment, it means that we have a national crisis. And it means that we are not deliberate and we are not robustly doing something to ensure that that is dealt with significantly.
We, of course, also don't have the GDP figures for the third quarter, but if we look at the sectors that have contributed here, finance, community and social services, agriculture, Dr. Nthabiseng, and those that contributed negatively, mining, manufacturing, these are, for instance, especially those last two that I've mentioned, are productive sectors, is what they're supposed to be in South Africa. And I'm wondering what this tells us about also the state of our private sector, and maybe even our public sector to some degree, and the ability for that to hold jobs in South Africa.
So clearly, the formal sector is the bulk of our economy, which is employing people. So more than 10 million people are employed in our formal sector, which comprises the sectors you've just mentioned. Agriculture, you've mentioned, in terms of its contribution in totality, in terms of sectors, has declined together with the informal sector in this quarter. But it's a minuscule decline, less than a percentage point. What I want to emphasize is exactly the point you've made, is that the productive sectors, the reason why unemployment has risen by 2.9 million in the last decade is because the productive sectors are contracting, is because your subsectors within manufacturing, not only because of Eskom or load shedding, not only because of the cost of doing business, not only because of cheap imports, it's a whole plethora of policy issues, from trade policy, industrial policy that is not effective, but also our growth strategy has not yielded results in terms of expanding our manufacturing and industrial sectors. We are still based largely on financing the mineral energy complex. Our banking and financial services sector is very risk averse and finances the mineral energy complex. Where South Africa needs to take a step is towards industrialization, is those 6 classification, is those 9 subsectors. These are labor absorptive, is particularly agricultural processing. These are labor absorptive sectors that are currently contracting, declining, and these will deal with the high levels of unemployment that we see across Mpumalanga, Limpopo, KZN, particularly the northern parts, Free State and the Eastern Cape, which are largely rural in nature. So I think that South Africa has to start to look at what is the economic strategy that is required for us to move towards this. And I think that we do not have a move. If you look at the occupations that people are largely in, the large majority of our people are in what we call elementary workers, domestic workers, craft and related, and plant and machine operators. And what you then begin to see is that more than 2/3 of our occupations are in the low or semi-skilled space, right? You have just over 1.45 million clerks, technicians, and also a professional sector. If you add up managers and professional sector, they account for about 16% of our total employment by occupation. So that's a very small component, right? It tells you the size of the private sector, it tells you the gains, and we're also seeing the patterns of employment. So I think for South Africa, we have to look at how do we deliberately change the structure, who we are employing in terms of sectors, and the sectors that really change the trajectory of unemployment in countries are your productive sectors, or your manufacturing sectors, or where you actually have factories, and they are closing down, unfortunately, not only because of load shedding, and I must say, and that's why it's important to understand that from Q3 2013 to Q3 2023, we have actually seen unemployment increase by more than 2.9 million.
Well, I think it's all we have time for today, but I'd like to thank you so much for putting these into perspective for us. It's been invaluable. Thank you for your time. That was Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko, a development economist at the Stellenbosch Business School. Up next, confusion about race-based quotas in terms of agricultural